I'm John McKee, editor of Messianic Apologetics. Messianicapologetics.net. And I would like to welcome you to this episode of Messianic Insider, your theology and news roundup for May the 29th, 2025. And there is a huge amount of news for us to go through, so not that we're going to rush through the theology roundup because we have a very important topic to discuss, but there is an unusual amount of news on all sorts of different fronts here. So we're just going to get right into it with our theology roundup. If you will please go to the Messianic Apologetics website. Here you have the FAQs tab, Frequently Asked Questions tab. There's a Volume 2 tab. So these are entries that we've been working on 2022 to the present. There is a Frequently Asked Question Volume 2 book in process. It's not on any timetable, but when the book gets too big, then we'll consider that it's time to release. Okay, so scroll down to the letter Y. These are all in alphabetical order. And here you see a new entry, Yeshua, worship of. Click there, and then a PDF file will open up. And this is, of course, a very important factor as it concerns the nature of Yeshua. When we use the term Christology, the term Christology is technical for the nature of Christ, the Messiah, the nature of Yeshua. And so why is the worship of Yeshua so important? How important is worship of Yeshua witnessed in the scriptures to regarding Yeshua as being genuinely God? Now, we're not going to go through all of the Bible passages which describe or detail veneration of Yeshua. We'd be here a very, very long time. But we are going to discuss briefly some of the major aspects you need to be aware of as a Bible reader and examiner. The first commandment explicitly prohibits the worship of any other deity than the Lord God of Israel. Exodus 20, verses 3 to 5, Deuteronomy 5, verses 6 through 9, meaning that some significant questions are posed from the apostolic scriptures when it is clear that Yeshua of Nazareth was venerated by people and various supernatural entities. How are examiners and readers to view such veneration of Yeshua? Is this to just be some kind of intensified honor, as could be demonstrated by the ancients toward various human kings, political leaders, and figures of importance? Or is the veneration which Yeshua of Nazareth received to be indeed regarded as worship? There are linguistic factors which play into evaluating the veneration demonstrated toward Yeshua of Nazareth. There is some disagreement about what the specific Hebrew verb translated worship in the first commandment, among other key places, actually is among lexicons, with the Theological Word Book of the Old Testament favoring the verb chava, but it more often favored to be the verb shacha. Lexically speaking, whether it is chava or shacha, the underlying Hebrew can be translated as either worship or bow down, depending on whether or not the God of Israel or some pagan deity is being venerated, or if just honor is being expressed toward another human being. The Greek equivalent via the Septuagint, which is also employed in the apostolic scriptures, is proskuneo, which in relative totality can mean worship, fall down and worship, kneel, bow low, fall at another's feet. Concise Greek-English Dictionary of the New Testament. The verb proskuneo can lexically be translated as either worship or bow down, certainly asking some important questions concerning how it is employed when veneration or honor is expressed toward Yeshua of Nazareth, i.e. Matthew 2:2, 11, 14:33, 28:9. Those who hold to a high Christology would for sure view the majority of uses of proskuneo in regard to veneration or honor of Yeshua of Nazareth being regarded as worship and not just some sort of bowing down. This especially concerns Tanakh intertextuality, where worship of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is ascribed to Yeshua, Hebrews 1:6 and Psalm 97:7. If Yeshua is not genuinely God, then to worship Yeshua is to violate the first commandment and commit blatant idolatry. Those who hold to a low Christology of Yeshua of Nazareth being some important human lord or master, and perhaps even a supernatural agent, but ultimately a created being, would not often consider worship to be ascribed to Yeshua. Where the verb proskuneo appears in the apostolic scriptures in association with honor of Yeshua, it is widely concluded to only involve people bowing down to the Messiah. So I said I was only going to give you some broad parameters for understanding the issue of the worship of Yeshua, but I have given you enough for your later reading and investigation of places where some kind of veneration is manifesting toward Yeshua, and take a special note of those places where some kind of Tanakh intertextuality is in view, where worship of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, God the Father, is applied to or involves Yeshua the Messiah. And indeed, worship of Yeshua is one of the most important aspects as it does concern his nature, his divinity. Okay, so we always do the news roundup after the theology roundup, mainly because our news stories, which we go through, most of which I encounter passively on social media, so Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, and some of you all have been known to send me stories directly. All of these things are time sensitive, especially as it involves things like the Israel-Hamas conflict, Russia-Ukraine, the Iranian situation, and various others. But it is, of course, important that we stay up to speed with what is happening, but yet we have to recognize that things change, and hopefully they change for interests of resolving conflict, peace in the world, and relative prosperity. But we are, whether we want to admit it or not, steadily edging closer to the Messiah's return. Okay, so all of these links I'm going to be going through, they will be accessible when this episode is archived on MessianicApologetics.net, so you can go read the articles or watch the little news clips in greater detail. Okay, so let's get started. A lot today. From charisma, whether you like charisma or not, it is one of the major places generally all Messianic people will go to for information. The headline is, "What Pope Leo said just shocked the world." Okay, so you look through this article and it springboards or piggybacks off the A recent declaration by Pope Leo XIV has stirred renewed interest in the centuries-old prophecy of the popes, a controversial and mysterious list of papal predictions attributed to 12th century Irish bishop Saint Malachi. The final entry of the prophecy reads, "In the final persecution of the Holy Roman Church, there will sit Peter the Roman, who will pasture his sheep in many tribulations. And when these things are finished, the city of 7 hills will be destroyed, and the dreadful judge will judge his people." The end. And apparently what Pope Leo XIV said, according to a report from Catholic News Agency, during a ceremonial visit with Rome's mayor, Pope Leo declared, "Today I can say that through you and with you I am Roman." That statement has ignited speculation that Leo may fit the final prophetic description more closely than any of his predecessors. Now, why are we passing this along? Do I personally put any stock in the St. Malachi prophecy? No, I don't. I do, however, monitor this kind of stuff because I know there are people out there who believe that has some validity or some relevance. I am far more interested in the policies, the tenor of the papacy of the now new Pope Leo XIV, mainly because a lot of premillennialists tend to associate the office of the papacy with the false prophet of Revelation. Now, there's no requirement at all that the false prophet of Revelation be a Roman Catholic pope. But this is something I think people will use in order to get clicks, to get attention on social media, and indeed stir a lot of, I think, unnecessary speculation. There are going to be other things which Pope Leo XIV does, especially as he is modeling his papacy off of Pope Leo XIII in terms of how does the Catholic Church respond to things like the modern age, technology, artificial intelligence, cloning, all of this kind of stuff. That is going to affect Catholics and non-Catholics alike. Those are the matters we need to be paying more close attention to as mature believers with the papacy, not this St. Malachi business. I'm sorry. I'm just not convinced. All right, from Open Source Intel, yesterday, May the 28th. Reports from Gaza, major embarrassment for Hamas as Palestinians storm and loot one of the group's own flour warehouses. Are they losing control? Time will tell. Now, how accurate is this kind of information? How inaccurate is it? Let's not think that every single Palestinian in Gaza supports Hamas. Let's recognize that there is a factor in play of how Hamas, in control of Gaza, has abused the people of Gaza. Along with that, here's another post. Gazans cheer after receiving aid, blowing kisses while saying Trump, Trump, Netanyahu. Okay, how accurate is this? Are there people in Gaza who, when receiving food, medical supplies, whatever it is, are issuing some kind of cheer, some kind of praise to President Trump, Prime Minister Netanyahu? Things are never as straightforward or as simple in various conflicts as any side wants them to be. But again, we just catalog this. We note that the tension is building, the pressure is building upon Israel to resolve this situation in Gaza. And I think that the patience is wearing thin on the part of certainly various European countries and even people in the U.S. administration. So along with that, this is from May the 28th. Trump, in response to a journalist's question about Netanyahu and an attack on Iran. I warned Netanyahu not to attack Iran because it could sabotage the nuclear talks. Now, Okay, so to continue, I didn't warn him. I told him it wasn't appropriate. There are good talks. It's not appropriate now. If we can solve it through a document, blowing up the labs without anyone being in them, that would be better. I told him it wasn't appropriate because we are very close to a solution. But that could change at any moment. It could change over a phone call. But right now, I think they want to make a deal, and it could save a lot of lives. One of the things which is true about the Iranian situation, Iranian nuclear program, yes, it does affect Israel, it does affect the Middle East, but it also affects Europe, and it also affects the United States of America. So this idea that Israel can just act unilaterally toward Iran, what about all the other people who are going to be affected by this? I think that is the perspective the president is coming from. And he wants to, in his tough way, if we can see this resolved without there being any loss of lives, let's do so. But yeah, we're going to hear a lot of different conflicting reports until this thing has been taken care of. Okay, slight change of gears here. This is from the Instagram channel Mindset of the Church. Patriarch Bartholomew, hope shines bright. Through dialogue and faith, the great schism can be healed, uniting Christians in love and shared devotion to Christ. Okay, so Patriarch Bartholomew, great schism can still be overcome. Patriarch Bartholomew, the ecumenical patriarch of Constantinople, remains hopeful that the great schism between the Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic churches can be overcome. He emphasizes dialogue, mutual respect, and shared faith as the key to healing the 1,000-year divide. All right, so not going to get into a whole lot of church history here, but there has been a huge split between the Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic churches for centuries. And with the new papacy of Pope Leo XIV, there is hope that that can somehow be patched up. Of course, a lot of people who are premillennial, they tie that into, well, there's going to be some kind of new world church, one world religion, and it's going to be centered around the Vatican, the Abrahamic faiths, and if you can get this thing resolved, then there'll just be some kind of a snowball effect. It'll just get larger and larger and larger with more religious ecumenicism and quote-unquote unity, watering down of essential doctrines, etc. We have no idea, but this is interesting, and we'll just have to wait and see. Here's an interesting article from My Charisma. This is a topic which comes up from time to time, and it's something which we don't often discuss, and we don't often discuss death that often. Certainly in Hebrew roots, there is a preference for soul sleep and annihilation. Those are not things I hold to. You can read my book, Messianics and the Afterlife. But still, what about the final disposition of one's mortal remains? So this article, does cremation cancel the resurrection? Here's what the Bible really says. And you can read this article in greater detail, but ultimately it says no, cremation does not cancel the resurrection, because there are going to be a lot of people throughout history who have decomposed into dust, basically. Now, in terms of some of the funeral matters our family has been involved with, all of my grandparents are now deceased. My McKee grandparents actually were deceased before I was born, 1960 and 1978. My grandparents on my mother's side, they passed away 1989, my grandfather, then 2019, my grandmother. So those are 30 years apart. But none of those natural grandparents were ever cremated. They did have what you would call a customary Protestant funeral with their bodies being embalmed, and then some kind of a viewing, and then burial in a casket with an outer container or vault. And those are things you will encounter in today's Messianic community, depending on the preference of the family. Now, both of my Huey step-grandparents, they were cremated, and that was their wish. But their cremated remains were buried at the Dallas-Fort Worth Military Cemetery. So there was no scattering of ashes. In my Messianic experience, we have encountered people who have opted for cremation and even scattering later. We've also seen people 5 years ago, the father of a dear Messianic Jewish friend passed away, and he had a burial within 48 hours, a customary Jewish burial. So there was no embalming. There was the traditional washing, being wrapped in a shroud, a simple kosher casket. He was buried in a Jewish section of one of the major cemeteries here in Dallas, but there was internment in an outer concrete box. And I think that was the cemetery's requirement, just to make sure that the cemetery would be level and the grave wouldn't fall in. So we do have a frequently asked question entry on funerals, that sort of thing, the FAQ2 tab. You can look that up. But this is something which does come up from time to time, and people do ask, and they do wonder about it. All right, our next story from the New York Post. This is from yesterday. President Putin's conditions for ending the war in Ukraine have been issued, according to Russian sources with knowledge of the negotiations. President Donald Trump has repeatedly said he wants to end the deadliest European conflict since World War II and has shown increasing frustration with Putin in recent days. Now, if you go and you read the article, basically, what are Putin's conditions for ending the war? Well, they involve, among other things, no new expansion of NATO, a commitment not only that Ukraine will not join NATO, but that Georgia, some of the other countries of the former Soviet Union, they will not join NATO. A lifting of sanctions against Russia by the West, an unfreezing of Russian assets, and protection for Russian speakers in Ukraine. Those are some of the conditions Putin has laid forth. So, look, we do pray that this conflict, Russia and Ukraine, which is definitely in the rubric of wars and rumors of wars, because Russia is the world's #1 nuclear weapons power. We do pray that, if at all possible, there can be an honorable peace. There has been a generation of both Ukrainian and Russian young people who have been decimated by this conflict. But yeah, this is a mess. And I'm of the opinion, and I know some people would disagree, that if Trump had been in the White House when this started, it would have ended very quickly. It would have been a skirmish, not this elongated conflict. All right, something a little happier from the Instagram channel Mouth Attack. In a major move toward cleaner eating, In-N-Out Burger is overhauling several of its core menu items to eliminate artificial additives. Of course, you know, that's a major thrust of Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr., Bobby Kennedy Jr. The popular West Coast chain is removing synthetic food dyes from its lemonade, strawberry syrup, and ketchup, opting instead for coloring derived from natural sources like plants, minerals, and insects. Okay, so one of the major things with the MAHA movement, Make America Healthy Again, is to get us off of all of these artificial chemicals in our food products. A major one is perhaps getting rid of a lot of corn syrup and going back to sugar. Sugar, which is not great for you, but corn syrup is a lot worse for you. And I'm encountering a number of products different soft drinks I like to have and all that, where I am seeing less corn syrup used. Now, In-N-Out Burger for a lot of people is kind of a destination place to go eat. We do have them in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. Other places have them as well. They're from the West Coast. I haven't been to In-N-Out in probably 8 or 9 months, so I'm probably due for a double animal style and animal style fries soon. But I'll make the point to ask, have you changed the recipe here at your location at all? So yeah, we always got to remember some of the news is not always bad news. Now, here the story says opting for coloring derived from natural sources like plants, minerals, and insects. Kosher status, question mark. We'll let that be a question which plays out as things change. Here's something which came across my Instagram feed, which I think is very important. And it goes along with how we monitor different stories, be they on Charisma Magazine, End Time Headlines. Here is a meme, of course, that's Bean from the British comedy series. The more things change, the more they stay Sumerian. And someone is writing Epic of Gilgamesh, Old Testament writers, and the byline is, nothing to see here, just ancient plagiarism. If you have not heard about things like the Epic of Gilgamesh or some of the Mesopotamian creation account, flood account in the Messianic community in the year 2025, that's pretty sad. Because even I remember attending my relative's church a number of years ago. It was an Episcopal church, and Father Tony Ferguson, the rector, got up and talked about how he knows that, there are people in college who are taking Bible as literature classes, and they're being told that the authors of the Old Testament copied off of the Mesopotamian creation and flood accounts. And I'm here to tell you that that's not true. There are other creation stories, other flood stories out there, but the Bible has a very unique message proving that it is the true message. These are not things today's Messianic people often discuss. We don't often discuss the ancient Near Eastern background of the Torah and Tanakh. We tend to place ourselves in an Orthodox Jewish bubble sometimes, only consulting things like, for example, the Art Scroll Tanakh or J.H. Hertz's Pentateuch and Haftorahs. Not that those are bad resources, but there are a lot of criticisms out there against the Bible involving things like this, which we really do need to be aware of. And entering into the future, these questions are going to be pronounced as there are more people talking about things like the Genesis 6 Nephilim. And, well, this is what early Genesis says, but here's what some of these other Mesopotamian stories tell us or communicate. And then also, well, what do you do about these other bodies of literature like First Enoch and what they talk about regarding the Watchers? So you have to have some of these discussions regarding which came first, the Mesopotamian creation and flood story or the flood story of the Torah, and not what do they have in common, but what's different about them. Okay, now we get to go back to regular news. From Open Source Intel, yesterday, May the 28th, Steve Witkoff on Gaza ceasefire. We are on the verge of launching a new document later today, and I have a good feeling about reaching a long-term ceasefire and a peaceful resolution to the conflict in Gaza. Okay? Who's going to say what about this? Here's something which ran across my X Twitter feed from Nio Berg's channel. Here you see a picture of, well, basically this is all the different volumes of the Art Scroll edition of the Talmud. Someone saying, I read the Talmud. No, you did not. And of course, what is the main point being conveyed here? The main point being conveyed is if you go on social media, there are a lot of people from the alt-right. They have become very anti-Semitic, very anti-Jewish because of half quotes here and there made from the Talmud. And they say, the Talmud promotes this, the Talmud promotes that. And this Jewish person says, you haven't read the Talmud. And here shows a big picture of all the volumes of the Talmud on a bookshelf. There are some FAQ entries that I have filed away at present, future FAQ entries, which deal with some of the potential, anti-Gentile, anti-non-Jewish statements of the Talmud, anti-Jesus, anti-Yeshua statements in the Talmud. The Talmud is a broad and diverse selection of religious literature. But if anyone tells you that they've read the Talmud, when what they really mean is they've read a quote here, cherry picked out, or a quote over there, cherry picked out, they haven't. But it is a responsibility of those of us in apologetics to be better informed as to how we approach the diverse array of religious literature known as the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud, the Jerusalem Talmud, as well as other bodies of religious literature as well, be it Jewish, Christian, or otherwise. From open source intel yesterday, May the 28th, Trump told reporters he warned Netanyahu not to strike Iran, saying a nuclear deal could be reached within months. Okay? This is a situation I know all of us want to see taken care of. But just like I said yesterday, what if, as part of the end time scenario, a Palestinian state is something in the works? Likewise, what if, as part of the end time scenario, Iran has something nuclear? We want a line extension of time, a line extension of peace and prosperity, and to live our lives normally. But, if you're part of the Messianic movement and you've invoked upon yourself end time move of God, sooner or later, end time factors are going to play into the mix. So we'll see. But we do have to be aware of the things going on. I think that's the most important. From the Instagram channel, Mindset of the Church, Gen Z is bringing a powerful revival to the church. With young hearts turning to faith, attendance is soaring, proof that God's love is timeless and unstoppable. Now, I do think it's good that hopefully Gen Z, the Zoomers, more are returning to faith than dismissing faith. But here, this post, of course, this is Roman Catholicism here, and it continues saying, church attendance in England and Wales is increasing for the first time in decades, driven by Gen Z. Monthly attendance among 18 to 24-year-olds has surged fourfold since 2018, with young men now outnumbering women in this age group, reversing long-standing trends. Okay, because Britain and Western Europe, I don't mean to say it's totally godless, but because it's very secular and highly atheistic, the fact that people, young men especially, they're attending church, that is a huge deal. Now, for those of us in the Messianic community in North America, I take this as a prompt to ask the question, as uncomfortable as it may be, how relevant is our faith community to Generation Z or the millennials who preceded Generation Z? Are we able to address and engage with the questions they have regarding God, faith, the Bible, biblical reliability, contemporary matters, or are we going to just continue in our own little bubble? And I can say this because I'm approaching 45 and I've been in the Messianic community for almost 30 years. And to be honest, on the whole, and I mean this with all the love and respect in the world, the Messianic community has not really been a place I have been able to turn to for the questions I have regarding modernity, post-modernity, the modern world, questions of biblical reliability, etc. I've had to look to evangelicalism for a lot of that. And I don't think that that's great. I think that if the Messianic community had less of a fear of the environment around us and the modern world around us, we'd be further down the road, and we'd have a lot more young people, we'd have a lot more people, and especially Jewish people, because Jewish people have more questions about the modern world and society than even Protestants do. From Newsmax, this is from yesterday. President Donald Trump on Wednesday said, "We'll know within 2 weeks whether Russian President Vladimir Putin has interest in ending the war in Ukraine." All right, so we'll see where we are in 2 weeks. But we know that things can and do change. That's something which can be accelerated, that's something which can be slowed, and that's something which can just fall through completely. This is interesting. From the Instagram channel Biohack Yourself Media, researchers at the California Institute of Technology, Caltech, have developed a revolutionary technique to 3D print living tissues inside the human body. No incisions required. So the headline is, doctors could soon 3D print organs inside your body. Okay, now, this definitely classifies in the realm of bioethics. So let's say, for example, you have a problem with one of your organs, you need a transplant, you can't get a transplant, but is it possible that you could grow a new kidney, a new liver, something like that? You could grow whatever it is, and it could be done inside your body using your DNA and using your genetic footprint. This is interesting. And how much of this are we going to see? Okay, so this entry says, in tests, scientists printed custom tissues directly inside the stomachs of rabbits and bladders of mice, and even created drug reservoirs that release medication when hit with ultrasound. Okay, so experiments are being done on animals. Could something like this be done on humans? I think a lot of people have less of an issue with this than they do with artificial wombs and infants being decanted. You know, if I need a replacement tongue, or I need a replacement lung, or whatever it might be, well, maybe they can just grow it inside of me and then easily make the switch out. Interesting. All right, from I-24 News English on X, and this is an Israeli channel, Trump, I told Netanyahu striking Iran is not appropriate right now because we're very close to a solution. It can change at any moment. It can change with a phone call. So speaking of Generation Z, we just talked about how in various places church attendance is on the rise. I generally take that as a good thing. But here's a chart from the X channel, The Art of Purpose. What's going on with the Zoomers? 7.2% of U.S. adults identify as LGBT. And here you see this 2022, this, what's the percentage? And Gen Z, 1997 to 2004, 19.7%. My goodness. Millennials, 1981 to 1996, 11.2% LGBT. And then, of course, goes down to 3.3% of Generation X, 1965 to 1980, 2.7% of baby boomers, 1.7% of traditionalists, those before 1946. Now, we know things like this. Are they accurate? Are they inaccurate? But what it does highlight is there are questions being asked by more and more younger people about human sexuality. And one of the things which does happen, and this is something which I think we need to take note of, especially in a very small faith community like the Messianic movement, which has very few young people. That's why a lot of young people don't marry. People like me haven't been able to marry because the selection is few and far between. In other religious sectors, it could be said now, and this is more, progressive religious sectors. Well, if you can't find, an opposite sex partner, Have you considered finding a same-sex partner? Those are questions which are being raised even in various liberal, progressive religious circles. So, my sister, who just got married last year at the age of 41, if she had been in different, progressive religious circles, which thankfully she was not, you can't find a husband if you can't find a man to love you. Have you considered a woman? Those are some of the factors which drive this in the religious world, as uncomfortable and as repulsive as some of you may find them to be. Okay, we still have a lot of news to go through. Here's an article which ran across my X feed. This is from the news source Middle East Eye. Smotrich, I hope I pronounced that properly, vows to rebuild temple during Jerusalem Day celebrations. Call by far-right finance minister would entail the destruction of Al-Aqsa Mosque. So here you have a very high-ranking member of the Netanyahu government. Israeli finance minister Bezalel Smotrich walks to visit the Damascus Gate in Jerusalem's Old City as Israelis mark Jerusalem Day, 26 May 2025. Call by far-right finance minister would entail the destruction of Al-Aqsa Mosque. So he obviously is from one of the religious parties in the coalition and supports the reconstruction of the temple on the Temple Mount. Now, when you factor in, if you're a premillennialist and you believe in a future abomination of desolation, that means it has to take place with some kind of functioning animal sacrifice. Most conclude that the third temple will be rebuilt, only to then be desecrated by the anti-Messiah or Antichrist. And I am inclined to believe in that direction. I don't personally think that a reconstructed temple is absolutely mandatory for the abomination of desolation to take place. I think it could take place in a tabernacle, for example, because we know that the tabernacle was in operation all the way until the reign of King Solomon. But I'm inclined to think the temple will be reconstructed. Does that absolutely require the removal of the Al-Aqsa Mosque? Or could you have the mosque and a reconstructed tabernacle reconstructed temple or operative tabernacle occurring side by side? That's where questions of what the anti-Messiah Antichrist is going to do, bringing at least the Abrahamic faiths together, coexist, all of this. But the point taken is that very high-ranking member of Netanyahu's cabinet, the finance minister, okay, that would be, in our case here in the United States, that would be like Scott Bessent, calling for this. Wants to rebuild the temple. Very big thing. So those sentiments of the reconstruction of the temple are alive and well in the modern state of Israel. Okay, so back to the whole hostage deal. Israeli minister Amichai Chilchi responds to the latest hostage deal. Against it. Enough with this salami tactic. Let our fighters finish the mission. Hamas should surrender and lay down their weapons. All hostages in exchange for the surviving Hamas leaders' exit from Gaza. Nothing less. Okay, so this is going to be hard fought. The resolution to the situation in Gaza with Hamas. And yeah, things do definitely change from day to day. Open source intel, this is from today, May the 29th. Gaza residents are heading to the new GHF American Distribution Center, located south of the Netzarim corridor in the Central Strip. So far, 3 out of 4 distribution centers in Gaza have been opened. And look, for the poor people who are caught in the midst of the Israel-Hamas conflict, hopefully in getting the relief supplies, the food, the medical supplies they need, we can see some of this tension greatly reduced and we can see resolution. That's what we got to be praying for as believers. Okay, and then finally, and this is from earlier today, May the 29th, from the X channel OSIN Defender, so that would be Open Source Intelligence Monitor. Despite a recent phone call with U.S. President Donald J. Trump, in which he reportedly warned Netanyahu against attacking Iran during the ongoing nuclear talks mediated by Oman, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has ordered the Israeli Air Force to prepare for unilateral strikes against Iran without the support of the United States, according to Ynet. Okay, so this is a rumor, and we will wait and see. But we have to be aware of these things because they do affect us as the Messianic community. Are we going to see a resolution to the situation, Hamas in Gaza? Are we going to see a resolution to the situation in Iran? Now, the Hamas situation affects more Israel itself directly, whereas the Iranian situation, that is interconnected to the Middle East, other countries, Europe, America, and then, of course, you got other powers, Russia, China, even Pakistan, you got to worry about there. So we don't know what's going to happen, but if you are not paying attention, please start paying attention, and not paying attention in a way which is fearful. I mean, the Lord knows what the final outcome is going to be. But people who are not paying attention, they're just living off in fantasy land, la la land, this doesn't affect us, especially our pre-tribulation rapture friends. Let's start paying attention more closely. And as we pay attention more closely, let us be able to inquire of the Lord, what do we need to be doing about this? You know, especially as we consider the needs of Generation Z. And yes, I'm a millennial, Generation Z, and many of them are returning to church. They're trying to return to the faith community, but many of them also are trying to find acceptance in LGBTQ matters. And this upcoming Shabbat, is your Messianic congregation just going to retreat to reading the weekly Torah portion, not really engaged perhaps with any ancient Near Eastern issues or ancient background in mind, much less asking questions of the modern world in which we actually live? So I think we're at a very interesting crossroads in about another month. So this would be June the 29th. I was reminded of this morning. We will be attending the Messiah 2025 conference, which is also, you know, it's the largest event our ministry attends, the largest Messianic conference in the world. But it's more than anything else, it's an important gauge regarding where the Messianic community is, the pulse of the movement, what people are talking about, what people are asking about. And the Lord will normally, you know, in a lot of the downtime we have, you know, communicate something important for me regarding the next year of service. More than anything else, it's, gee, we've got all these new topics we get to discuss, and we got all these new issues we get to evaluate. How engaged are we with the modern world? This has never been a strong suit of today's Messianic movement. I'm sorry to say that. But it is one of the reasons why we've gone 5 times a week with Messianic Insider. We have what I like to call the ongoing conversation. We go day to day and we talk about these matters. And hopefully you've been edified as well as challenged in the right way by our discussions. As always, on behalf of Outreach Israel Ministries and Messianic Apologetics, I would like to sincerely thank you for your ongoing prayers, encouragement, and donations toward all of our ministry efforts. You can give online at outreachisrael.net/support. We'll see you again tomorrow with another episode of Messianic Insider. Until then, may God bless you. Shalom, and take care.